Former FBI Director James Comey indicted again. Seashells by the seashore. Yes, a federal case is being made about it. King Charles addresses Congress in appeal to remember and reinvigorate the special relationship. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker on his state's Immigration Accountability Commission, prediction market regulation, and the future of the Chicago Bears. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in New York. Welcome to the Takeout. The Trump Justice Department today indicted former FBI Director James Comey for this Instagram post. The allegation? It was an incitement of violence against the president. The department went to the Eastern District of North Carolina to obtain this indictment. It comes as Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, President Trump's former personal attorney, has made it abundantly clear he would like to be nominated for Attorney General. Pam Bondi, fired last month as Attorney General, drew Trump's wrath in part because of a perceived ineffectiveness in pursuing Trump's political enemies. This context cannot be separated from the Comey indictment today. Interestingly, today also saw a new development in the case of James Comey's daughter, Maureen Comey. A federal judge ruled that Maureen Comey, a prominent former federal prosecutor, can proceed with her lawsuit against the Trump Justice Department for her termination. Maureen Comey's suit alleges she was fired, quote, solely or substantially because her father is former FBI Director James B. Comey, or because of her perceived political affiliation and beliefs, or both, unquote. There was also a significant appeals court ruling today against Trump administration mass deportation policy. A 3-0 ruling from the Second Circuit Court rejected efforts to deport people without release on bond if they have no criminal records and have lived in America for years or decades. Federal Appeals Court Judge Joseph Bianco, a Trump appointee, said the policy amounted to a seismic shock to established immigration detention procedures and constituted a, quote, radical break from precedent far beyond congressional intent. This ruling, we should note, conflicts with much more sympathetic rulings from the Fifth and Eighth Circuit Courts of Appeal, meaning Supreme Court review of this matter is virtually certain. All of these legal events serve as an unintended and a somewhat blurry constitutional backdrop for the second day of King Charles's visit to America, a visit to honor our 250th birthday, a birthday announced to the world via a Declaration of Independence from the British monarchy that decried, and I quote, repeated injuries and usurpations of law. For more on the James Comey indictment, we turn to Katrina Kaufman, who's here with me in New York. Katrina, talk about the indictment and, well, first, I want to play what the Acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, said about the indictment today. Let's hear that.
I think it's fair to say that threatening the life of anybody is dangerous and potentially a crime. Threatening the life of the President of the United States will never be tolerated by the Department of Justice.
So, Katrina, this sounds like it's a new matter. It's not necessarily a new matter.
That's correct, Major. This is something that was looked into. It took place almost a year ago, actually. James Comey was on vacation in North Carolina. He says that he saw this configuration of seashells on the beach, took a photo, posted it. The Secret Service actually tracked him and his wife down, ended up interviewing him on the phone, in person. He said that he was not making any threat to the life of the president, and at the time the matter was dropped. We're now seeing it revived, and this also comes after a prior effort to indict James Comey on totally separate charges was ultimately dismissed. But the specific charges we're seeing now are knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and cause bodily harm to the President of the United States. And then another one related to transmitting interstate and foreign commerce, a communication that threatens to kill the president. So there are a couple important elements here. One is the knowingly and willfully. So there has to be intent. This notion of intent to cause harm to the president, there is a very high bar. This also implicates free speech, true threats. And then there's the element that a reasonable person has to have understood that that is what this message was supposed to mean. If they saw it, that they would have realized that he was saying, you should assassinate the president of the United States.
Because 86 in some context can be interpreted as a cancel or kill idea or notion.
Correct. And that 47, Trump says, refers to him as the 47th president of the United States. However, Major, this made it past a grand jury. We know that that is a significantly lower bar, although DOJ is not always even successful with them these days. But will it make it past a judge? Will she say, when she looks at this, yes, I can see that you can actually define these two elements, 86 and 47, as a threat against the president? And if it comes to it, will it make it past a jury?
And worth noting again that this was looked at by the self-same Trump Justice Department a year ago. No charges brought then, but brought now. Katrina Kaufman, really helpful. Thank you so very much. We turn now to Ed O'Keefe, who is at the White House. Ed, let me talk to you about something that happened today with Jimmy Kimmel, ABC, Disney, and the... Catch us up.
Major, a day after the president called on ABC to fire its late-night host Jimmy Kimmel, the Federal Communications Commission announced that it is going to start reviewing 8 broadcasting licenses that are owned or managed by Disney. These are the 8 what we call owned and operated television stations that are essentially affiliates or local stations of the ABC television network. The FCC says they're concerned that Disney's corporate diversity policies may have violated anti-discrimination rules. We'll get to ABC's response in a second. This all stems, at least this latest round of concern between the White House and Disney, from something Jimmy Kimmel said last Thursday night. He'd published a video that showed him pretending to be the MC of the correspondents' dinner and made a joke suggesting that the First Lady had the glow of an expectant widow out of the fact that the president is someone who's older than she is. In the wake of what happened Saturday night at the Correspondents' Dinner, the First Lady said enough is enough. The president joined her in that yesterday, saying that he should be fired. Kimmel responded late last night.
It was a very light roast joke about the fact that he's almost 80 and she's younger than I am. It was not, by any stretch of the definition, a call to assassination, and they know that. I've been very vocal for many years speaking out against gun violence.
Disney points out that these licenses weren't up for review, because they are up for review every few years before the FCC, until 2028 at the earliest. In fact, between the years 2028 and 2031. So they're starting this process at least 2 years earlier than expected for a handful of the stations. And it says in a statement, ABC and its stations have a long record of operating in full compliance with FCC rules and serving their local communities with trusted news, emergency information, and public interest programming. We're confident that records demonstrate our continued qualifications as licensees under the Communications Act and the First Amendment. And we should also point out, obviously it's a Republican-controlled commission right now, but the Democratic commissioner of the FCC, the lone one, Ana Gomez, today said this may be the most egregious attempted violation of the First Amendment yet by the current leadership of that panel. Major.
Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you very, very much. On Capitol Hill today, King Charles addressed a joint meeting of Congress, becoming only the second British monarch to do so. Here is some of what we heard.
Whatever our differences, whatever disagreements we may have, we stand united in our commitment to uphold democracy.
CBS News royal contributor Amanda Foreman joins me now. Amanda, your impressions of the monarch's speech?
My first impressions are that this is a particularly well done, well-crafted speech, very similar to the one that his mother gave 35 years ago. You can hear some of the same tropes, even almost some of the same sentences, slightly reworked. But old wine in, as they say, new skin, and substantially rejuvenated for the times we live in now. I think people are going to be quietly celebrating in Buckingham Palace right now.
And there's a reference continuously in this visit, and as America regards its relationship with the United Kingdom, the special relationship. That terminology was coined some 80 years ago by Winston Churchill in a very famous speech about the Iron Curtain. What do you believe the special relationship is now, and how binding it still is, or is it somewhat bygone?
Well, the special relationship has been redefined in every generation by the politicians who use the phrase. So, and every time the next generation comes into power, that redefinition causes a lot of unease. But the way the king explained it today was shared values, a commitment to prosperity, equality, diversity, maintaining not just peace in the world, but maintaining the economic and eco-balance of the world. So that is the new special relationship. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that broad outline.
And there's something else that's part of the conversation. I know it's not a dominant part of the conversation, but some members of Congress who were in attendance in that chamber have brought up former Prince Andrew, the Epstein scandal and its implications for the monarchy and this understanding between the United Kingdom and America. How do you evaluate all that?
One of the very interesting things about American politics is that it's always domestic, even when it's international. So it isn't surprising that Ro Khanna, in particular, brought up the Epstein case. But as insiders in Washington knew from the get-go, it was never going to be referenced in the King's speech, except for the fact that he did refer to the victims of current ills in our societies, which is a kind of blanket reference to, absolutely everything. The King has divested himself of his brother in the most public way possible, and justice will take its course. So it really was irrelevant. What was more interesting about the King's speech were the times when that he inserted a phrase on his own, probably over the screaming objections of people in the palace and among his advisors. In particular, for example, when he said, from the Atlantic Sea to our disastrously melting polar ice caps, talking about the special relationship and how it encompasses the world. That phrase, he inserted, and they were begging him to take it out. So every now and then there's a moment of the King himself coming in. He really cares deeply about climate change and conservation in particular. But as a Christian, so he's always balancing his opinions anyway. As a man of faith, I believe in supporting people of all faiths and no faiths. But every time the King put himself into the speech, it became really alive. And when he didn't, like when he talked about investment and statistics, and it got rather dull, that's just the advisors throwing the usual, meat and potatoes in there.
Always great to imagine an assertive king and shouts from some distant part of the realm about what the assertive king has said before Congress. Amanda Foreman, thank you very much for your perspective. I appreciate it. We're learning more today about the man accused of opening fire at the White House Correspondents' Dinner Saturday evening. Cole Allen legally purchased the firearms he used in that attack. Authorities have confirmed what they said earlier, that he traveled via train from Los Angeles to Washington ahead of the dinner. Allen has yet to enter a plea and will return to court Thursday. Retired U.S. Senior Secret Service agent Timothy Rebule joins me now. He protected 5 presidents from the years 1999 to 2021. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much. Cut to the chase. As you evaluated what you've seen, the surveillance video, what's your reaction?
My initial reaction is obviously shock. You hope this never happens, but then ultimately is somewhat prideful as a retired Secret Service agent, because the men and women of the Secret Service did their job that night. The layered approach of security worked, and they should be applauded for the actions that they took that day.
And when you hear skeptics say, wait a minute, yes, it's layered, but if he hadn't tripped, he might have made it to open ballroom doors and could have done something quite more dangerous. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's always a possibility, and sitting back and looking at it, Monday morning quarterbacking it. But a lot of people don't really understand the site. As a retired agent, I've been to that site hundreds of times. And the level, yes, it was in the middle perimeter of the layered security approach, but he still wasn't close to the protectees. And I'm not only mentioning the president, but the vice president, the first lady, the second lady, and many other cabinet level officials.
And how about the response time to get to those who required protection? The president, the first lady, the vice president on the dais, and some of the cabinet secretaries distributed around the ballroom. Was that satisfactory? Because some people have counted 10, 11 seconds, something like that, and say, wait a minute, that seems like a long time.
I thought it was an amazing response, and as a retired agent, that is going to be studied and looked at as the model of what to do. And the term we use in the Secret Service is muscle memory. You train, and train for that day in particular. And the coordination, the communication of interagencies, because let's remember there was a lot of interagencies between Capitol Police and other agencies. The communication, I thought, was perfect, flawless. This isn't the movies. This is real life. And again, everybody should be applauded.
The president told my colleague Nora O'Donnell in an interview for 60 Minutes that maybe the magnetometer should be placed farther away from the ballroom as maybe a security adaptation. How would you evaluate that?
Yeah, that's always a possibility, and it's very site-specific. Certain sites across town in D.C., we may push that perimeter out a little bit further, but a lot of it, let's remember, it's the White House Correspondents' Dinner. People are in ballroom dresses and tuxedos, so we work with the staff very closely, and a lot of staff in the Secret Service is give and take. So maybe in the future that would be the proper answer, but for that particular night, we had to go with the staff.
I mentioned on this program last night a bit of the history of the Washington Hilton, and we played the video of President Reagan walking outside of it in 1981 after that assassination attempt by John Hinckley. A special entrance for the presidential limousine was built, and it was basically assumed at the Washington Hilton from that point forward that we're good because the president is never going to be exposed going to that ballroom where several events that attract the president are held. The National Prayer Breakfast is held there, as you well know. And I wonder, well, the president's good. That assumption, maybe, did it create a kind of, I don't want to say lower security attitude, but different than it would be in another kind of venue where you don't have a secure, absolutely secure entrance for the president and the presidential limousine?
I would say no. We don't assume anything. The day you start assuming anything, that's when real problems happen. A lot of people have to take into account the fact that also the Washington Hilton is a fully functioning hotel with approximately 1,107 rooms. It's 1 million square feet. We carve out a portion which is about 118,000 square feet for that event, but it's give and take. We still, as federal law enforcement agents, we want American citizens to enjoy their vacations to D.C. and stay the night. So it's give or take. Honestly, it would be easy to make it a police state, but that's not the country we live in. So Secret Service does a fantastic job
of balancing these things,
balancing those two things, unlike any other federal law enforcement agent, or let's put it, any other law enforcement agency in the world.
Timothy Ribble, I appreciate you coming in very much for your perspective. Really, really appreciate it. Still to come on The Takeout, my conversation with Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker. The state of the investigation in Illinois on the Trump administration's aggressive tactics, specifically in Chicago. Florida's redistricting proposal would very likely make Democrat Kathy Castor's House district more Republican. Well, the congressman joins me to talk about what that means for her and whether it's legal. Plus, CBS News polling, brand new, on the governor's race in California as the candidates prepare for another debate tonight. Our political panel will weigh in on that and a whole lot more. The Takeout returns, I'm happy to say, in 90 seconds. Illinois officials held a second day of public hearings as part of an investigation into Operation Midway Blitz, an immigration crackdown orchestrated last fall by the Trump administration. At least one person was killed during that crackdown. Today's testimony included a first-hand account from a woman who was shot by Border Patrol agents after following the agent's vehicle, warning other residents that, quote, ICE was in the neighborhood, unquote. The Department of Homeland Security initially claimed this woman rammed into the officer's car, but body cam footage released later in the investigation appeared to show an officer swerving into her vehicle. This is just one of the stories being highlighted by the Illinois Accountability Commission. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker joins me now. Governor, it's good to have you on the program. Is the point of this public hearing to build the case for either civil litigation or possible criminal indictments?
That's exactly right, Major, because you know that the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the supervisors that stand over the CBP and ICE agents aren't holding them accountable. And so we know that if we keep a record, that we can ultimately hold them accountable. And indeed, we're using that record even now in federal court to limit what they can do. They've been tackling and detaining U.S. citizens, black and brown people, people who speak with an accent, and using that as an excuse to take people away. So we know that that's illegal. We also know that that's against law enforcement protocol. So these people need to know that if they keep doing it, they're eventually both going to lose their jobs and maybe even their freedom.
Governor, you well know this administration, if it were here, would say, what about the accountability in Chicago or in Illinois for those who have either lost their lives or been victimized by crimes committed by undocumented personnel, either in the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois? Do you have any curiosity about that side of the ledger?
Well, we ought to go after, as the president said he was going to, the worst of the worst. I want to get violent criminals off our streets. We've been working, of course, for years with the FBI, ATF, the DEA to do exactly that. Now we have CBP and ICE entering, and frankly, they're breaking the law as they're doing it, but they're not holding the worst of the worst accountable. They're just literally going after people who are minding their own business or peacefully protesting. They should be going after those violent criminals and not after peaceful protesters.
As you know, Governor, after Chicago, it was Minneapolis. That was Operation Metro Surge. I only bring Minneapolis up because today there was a series of raids seeking fraud in the healthcare space, jointly conducted by the state and the federal government. Fraud is something that's been prioritized by the administration through Vice President J.D. Vance. In Illinois, if the feds came to you, would you cooperate in similar kind of anti-fraud raids as occurred today in Minnesota?
Look, any fraud that gets identified is something that we want to investigate and hold people responsible for. I want you to know, though, that we have an auditor general who is constantly on duty in the state of Illinois auditing our departments. We also have internal audits in each one of our departments. And we, of course, want to go after any money that belongs to the taxpayers that's being misused. So we do that. We do that with the Attorney General. We do that with law enforcement. We do that with our inspectors general. I wish they were doing that at the federal level, because you can see the corruption that's going on in the Trump administration, where people are literally getting away with billions of dollars, right, misusing their positions to make money, and no one's holding them accountable. And apparently the president is even offering maybe to pardon those people. So look, I'm opposed to fraud, to waste, to abuse in government, but let's do that at every level of government. Let's hold people accountable.
Let's talk about prediction markets for a second. You recently signed an executive order informing state employees not to use non-public information to bet within prediction markets. Was that going on? Is that something you're trying to get ahead of? And you've been sued, or the state has been sued by the Trump administration over trying to apply gambling laws to prediction markets. Explain both of those to me.
Well, let me be clear. The prediction markets have taken the place of sports betting, for example, and so they go unregulated because the CFTC, which supposedly regulates the prediction markets, is doing nothing about this. And yet we are very careful about who we give sports betting licenses to. It's not right. It's not fair to those companies that go through a vetting process in our state in order to earn one of those licenses, to then have the federal government authorizing these prediction markets to do anything. Now, back to why did we ban our state employees from betting on these prediction markets? Because some of the things that can be bet on are things that are under the control of someone working in government. You saw that the other day at the federal level, where there was a soldier who was arrested, in fact, for betting on the Maduro detainment and arrest in Venezuela. He knew already ahead of time that that was going to happen, and he bet on it. We don't want someone who's in control of the outcome to be able to bet on it. We've banned that in sports betting. We should have banned that in prediction markets. And so that's why I've told anybody working for state government that is now prohibited.
Let me talk to you about something I read in the Chicago Tribune recently, and I'm going to paraphrase it. The Bears are leaving Chicago. The question is for where? Hammond, Indiana, or Arlington Heights, Illinois? Where are they going to go, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, we want them to stay in the state of Illinois. They've looked for a place to stay in the city of Chicago. Remember, teams across the NFL have moved to new stadiums, built big new stadiums with all kinds of new amenities. The fans love it. The teams love having that. It expands their market. But there just isn't a piece of property that they've been able to find in the city of Chicago. We've tried to help them do that. So they own already 300 acres out in Arlington Heights, and they've thought about moving there long ago. They also are talking to the state of Indiana. I will say, we're, of course, offering them the incentives to stay in the state of Illinois. We recognize, though, that my job is to protect the taxpayers of Illinois. That's my North Star. and then to make sure that we keep the bears. So we have to, cut the middle of that, make sure that the bears get what they need to stay, and that we're not giving away taxpayer money in order to build them a new stadium. I know they're willing to give lots of things away in Indiana, the taxpayers' money, easy to hand over to anyone, including the Chicago Bears. But the Chicago Bears will lose an awful lot of fans if they try to get up and leave the state of Illinois. We're going to have to start calling them the Hammond Hams.
Well, the legislature's got the clock ticking on it. It's got to have something resolved, as I understand it, by the end of next month. What are you doing to see that that gets done?
Well, that is, in fact, the end of the legislative session here in Illinois. So that for sure is the deadline. They know that. I've been pushing and pushing to get the legislature to move as fast as humanly possible. I'm the one who put a deal on the table that the Bears like, that the legislature has taken up. We've gotten it through the House of Representatives, although it's got some things in it that I think need to get changed. The Senate is now going to consider that bill and hopefully approve a bill that is acceptable to the Bears and for taxpayers. And if we get all of that done, I'm going to sign a bill and we're going to be shaking hands with the Chicago Bears staying in the state of Illinois.
The Chicago Bears, not the Hammond Hams, as described by the Democratic governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has aggressively thrown his state into the nationwide redistricting battle. Up next, I will speak with one of the House Democrats whose seat could be redrawn to her detriment. That's coming up on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. The nationwide redistricting fight has now moved to Florida, where lawmakers are weighing and expected to approve Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' proposal to redraw the state's congressional map. Take a look. The current map is on your left. The proposed one, drafted entirely by the governor, is on your right and would possibly give Republicans as many as 4 more congressional seats. Florida Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor joins me now. If approved, this map would redraw her district. Congresswoman, it's great to have you on the program. You've called this new map blatantly illegal. What is illegal about it, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, thanks, Major. And I saw that you were at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I'm glad you're safe and everyone is safe. Florida is a little bit different when it comes to drawing districts. In 2010, the Florida voters added language to our state constitution that outlaws partisan gerrymandering. So that is not allowed. And this is blatantly intended to favor a political party. So this is going to fail in the courts, but it's really too bad that we have to go through this partisan charade. It's a waste of time and money, and voters are really angry right now. They want public servants and politicians focused on the cost of living. And right now, there is a very high cost of living in the state of Florida, a real affordability squeeze, whether you're talking about groceries, electric bills, the price at the pump, hurricane recovery. And this comes at a time when people just want folks focused on solutions rather than going off on this waste of time and money.
As you know, Governor DeSantis has said Florida suffered an undercount after the 2020 census. That would implicate, of course, the Trump administration, which conducted that 2020 census, but I'll put that to the side, and that the districts drawn from that 2020 census were racially drawn, and that is a violation of Florida's Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. How do you evaluate those arguments?
Well, that's not true. That's a pretense and a sham. In our state constitution, not only are you disallowed from drawing a district based upon a political party or to favor an incumbent, but you do have to take in mind racial considerations. Districts are directed to be compact, contiguous, and to keep communities of interest together, like city boundaries and county boundaries. The governor is way out here. He's really seeking the favor of the president. The scuttlebutt is he would like a job because his term comes to an end in November with the election. And And he's willing to go through this charade, this sham, to redraw districts that are totally out of sync with our state constitution. Clearly, he is doing this for a partisan purpose to favor a political party, which runs directly counter to the Florida Constitution.
If the new map holds, and I know that's a big if, your 14th district would be substantially redrawn. Would it put you in political jeopardy?
I always fight for my life, no matter how the district is configured. And I've run under a number of different maps, and Florida has changed. It was solidly for Barack Obama both times he ran, but it went for Donald Trump both times. It's been purple in the past, but right now there is a change afoot, and it is because of the soul-crushingly expensive cost of living driven by a lot of the Republican policies. Remember the big ugly bill that the Republican Congress passed? It ripped away health care from millions of Americans. More Floridians rely on the Affordable Care Act for their health care than folks of any other state. So that is causing a lot of economic pain right now. Tariffs are causing a lot of pain. People drive a lot in Florida. So pain at the pump. So a lot of these driven by the Trump and Republican policies have caused people to say, I don't care what my political party is. We don't like the Republican policies out of the Trump administration. And the folks know it. DeSantis knows it. Trump knows it. We've had special elections in Florida where Democrats have way outperformed what people thought would happen. So they're scared. They're scared that they're going to be in political peril and could lose seats this election. That's why they're trying to rig this election by drawing new maps that, again, are illegal under our Florida Constitution.
Florida Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Major.
Tonight, another debate between the top candidates for governor of California, hosted, we are proud to say, by CBS. Our political panel will preview that, and we'll ask tongue-in-cheek, should a podium be reserved for undecided? That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. CBS News polling shows somewhat tight race for California's governor in the open primary in that state. Republican Steve Hilton, 16%. Democrats Tom Steyer, Javier Becerra, trailing him somewhat closely. But look at that. 26% of those polled undecided. The candidates will hold their second debate tonight, hosted by CBS. I want to mention that at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, that will be simulcast right here on CBS News 24/7. I want to bring in our political panel, Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to the DNC, Zach Petkanis, and a well-recognized figure in New York politics, former Republican New York City mayoral candidate Curtis Sliwa. Before we get to the California thing, gentlemen, great to have you with you. I want to read a statement we just got from James Comey, former FBI director. Well, they're back, he says. This time about a picture of seashells on a North Carolina beach a year ago, and this won't be the end of it, but nothing has changed with me. I'm still innocent, I'm still not afraid, and I still believe in the independent federal judiciary. So let's go. Curtis, your reaction to the second indictment of James Comey, former FBI director, over seashells that said 86-47.
Now, was this done by the Department of Justice and the interim attorney general, or is this done by Donald Trump himself in his act of vengeance and revenge? This is like The Godfather, you know, he's out with a vendetta. Stop it. You see, your polls are so bad. We're going to get destroyed in the midterm elections. And now he's going to go after Tish James, all of his other perceived or real enemies. It's not what you should be using the Department of Justice. He was embarrassed the first time. He'll be embarrassed again.
And this is not just bad justice, but bad politics from your point of view.
Absolutely. People are not interested in this. Affordability, cost of living, and the fact that a cost of a gallon of gas average $4.17. What the hell are we doing in Iran?
Zach, I don't think you need to add very much to that, do you?
No, I agree. But I think it's actually pretty directly connected to the affordability piece. This is an attempt to distract from the fact that gas prices, as Curtis just said, are $4 a gallon, that we have the price of beef is up 12% over the last year. They'll do anything to try to change the subject, even with this nutty vengeance track that Curtis talked about to try to change the subject.
Let's go out to California, my home state where I grew up. San Diego's where I'm from. There's an open primary in California, so the top two finishers go to the general election. Zach, this is a persistent question for Democrats. Is there going to be a Democrat in there in the top two? And is it going to be Tom Steyer, of all people, a billionaire who suddenly become Mr. Progressive?
Look, I think that the California race is, I'm not sure who the Democratic nominee is going to be, but I think there is definitely going to be one. But I think the interesting thing for me is on the Republican side is Steve Hilton. Who seems to be consolidating amongst Republicans. That should be
got the Trump endorsement.
Got the Trump endorsement, which I think is actually really bad news for California Republicans. The Trump endorsement, he is so toxic right now with gas prices in California that are skyrocketing. We have grocery prices that are going crazy because of the tariffs. Steve Hilton is going to have to own every single one of those Trump policies because of this endorsement, and that is bad, bad news for Republicans in California.
Curtis, you have lived experience with being a Republican in a place or a jurisdiction that is predominantly Democratic. California didn't always exist that way, but it exists that way now. Any advice for Steve Hilton?
Well, they got an advantage with this guerrilla primary, right? You could end up with two Republicans. But my problem with Hilton has nothing with what he stands for. But now that the king and the queen are over here, and I hate the royalty, up the rebels, right? I listened to this guy's English accent, and I said, you know, Californians are pretty open-minded. But I think when all is said and done, that's going to resonate. That's going to hurt him. I actually like the sheriff from Riverside County. I know he's...
Chad Bianco.
Right, he's trailing in the polls, but I think he's the better candidate if you're looking at a Republican.
So here in New York, I've got to talk to you gentlemen about New York. The governor has proposed a pied-à-terre tax. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know what a pied-à-terre is from a poppy seed muffin. I'm not wealthy enough for that. But apparently it's about people who have second homes. Let's run this soundbite from current New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani about that policy. Listen.
I'm thrilled to announce we've secured a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city. Like for this penthouse, which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million.
Curtis.
You know, the Citadel billionaire must be the most unlucky guy in the world. He loves Chirac.
That's Ken Griffin, right?
He loves Chicago. He had to pick up and move. Who can blame him there? You know, he'd be subject to drive-by shootings. Comes to New York. He's got his penthouse. He has another apartment. And he's all bent out of shape that Zohran Mamdani's out downstairs doing a video. Meantime, they're backdooring it with the governor. And you know who started this whole pied-à-terre, you know, the second tax, pied-à-terre? It was Andrew Cuomo. That's where it all started. Cuomo's the architect. Zohran Mamdani's the apprentice. And they're just going to have to get used to it. And if they don't like it...
Good idea or bad idea?
I'm saying if they don't want to pay it, they're free to move. That's what's great about America. Montana, Wyoming, there's plenty of land out there.
Zach, give me your evaluation of this, 45 seconds.
I think it's going to be very hard for Americans to feel bad for a guy with a $238 million Manhattan penthouse apartment that he barely visits. And he's very concerned. He has his feelings hurt because a tweet said he may have to pay a little more in taxes. There are things to criticize Mamdani about, perhaps, but hurting Ken Griffin's feelings is not one of those things.
Curtis?
Oh, taxing billionaires is very popular. Notice the initiative in California, it's going to be on. Mm-hmm. But the other initiative, that's why I love California initiative and referendum, you got to show ID when you vote. So there's a conservative initiative and referendum, and there's a liberal initiative and referendum. Let the people decide.
That's why we love California. That's why I love California. Zach, Pat Canis, very great to have you. Curtis Lewa, great to have you in the program. Thanks for being with us. In our effort to share with you a bit of CBS radio history, it's fitting that the British monarch visits the U.S. We'll take you back to another moment, historic one for the crown, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. That's what we feature next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Time for our CBS Radio Clip of Fame. This one, as they say, is on the nose. To honor the visit of King Charles, we bring you CBS News radio coverage of the coronation of the King's mother, Queen Elizabeth II. It was the first coronation carried on television. Britons watched it live, but film had to be flown to America for later broadcast. That meant radio was first, with word pictures that met a moment of royal grandeur.
This is the coronation. This is the big day in London. This is the great spectacle of the Middle Ages, transforming the world's biggest city into a setting from a fairy tale, splashed with the colors of scarlet and gold, and ringing with the tramp of military boots, the rattling of sword and bayonet, the blare of trumpets, and the clatter of horses' hoofs. This is the day that the young lady named Elizabeth Alexandra Mary is crowned Elizabeth II by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and her other realms and territories. Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. This is Robert Trout speaking from the center of London, the broadcasting platform high up on the side of the Middlesex Guildhall, opposite Westminster Abbey, where William the Conqueror was crowned nearly 900 years ago, and where today the solemn ceremonies of the coronation are to be acted out before 7,000 privileged guests, mostly peers and peeresses of the realm, in the robes of state, crimson with collars of white fur. Since not long after dawn, the nobles have been in their places inside the Abbey, waiting through the long hours for the great moment when they will place their coronets upon their heads and fill the great church with their cry, God save Queen Elizabeth, long live Queen Elizabeth, may the Queen live forever.
The sky that morning, dull, gray, the temperatures chilly, crowds in the tens of thousands waded through rain for 2 days for an event that required 14 months of preparation.
At the moment, I can see the last of the coaches that have brought the princes and princesses of the blood royal standing there before the annex, about to move along. There remains now the last of the processions, the procession from Buckingham Palace. And so for the magical moment, when the Queen reveals herself to her capital city on the way to her crowning, we switch from Westminster Abbey to our Canada Gate position outside Buckingham Palace, and to the voice of Edward R. Murray.
Now we are on the Victoria Memorial, directly in front of Buckingham Palace. It's a surly, uncertain sort of day. The royal standard stands stiff in the breeze. The clouds are rather low-hanging. It was on exactly a day such as this that German dive bomber came down through the barrage balloon and hit the northeast corner of the planet. For the last 2 hours, we have been standing here watching the departure of the rulers of the colonies, then the prime ministers of the dominions, Sir Winston Churchill and Lady Churchill. Sir Winston without his cigar, wearing the uniform of the Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports. I can see just through the archway now the royal carriage. It's standing quite silent. Now coming through the center arch as a detachment of the household cavalry. Burnished breastplates, white plumes, black horses. Moving very slowly. So far, we have not seen a man thrown here today, although one Air Chief Marshal had a guardsman holding, or rather leading, his horse. Looking in the opposite direction, we can look about 3/4 of a mile down the Mall to Admiralty Arch. And for the last 35 minutes, guardsmen have been flowing down there like a red river between green banks. Just directly in front of us now, at this end of the Mall, about 50 yards away, we can see the yeomen of the guard and the Queen's bargemen lined up. There is a thin scarlet line of guardsmen on both sides of the Mall. And along the edges of the stands here, the stands being painted blue, there are red geraniums, exactly the same color as the guardsmen's tunics.
The voices of CBS News on the radio, June 2nd, 1953. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.